This conference will now be recorded.
All right, good morning. The class is going to talk about how houses are constructed, and then we're going to talk about some of the components that you should look for when you're showing property or listing a house. Some of these things should be viewed beforehand so that in the event of an inspection, if you're representing a seller, then you can address them up front and maybe save them some money. Conversely, with a buyer, if you can identify some of these issues, then when the home inspector comes along, they're not so taken aback by the fact there's 65 pages of stuff about their house. You've already pointed out some of the issues, so you've diffused the overwhelming report that they're going to get. So first of all, this is a floor plan, and you have to understand that you need to pick a lot, and then the house will fit on the lot. If you're looking at a particular house plan, not all lots will accommodate that plan. So it's important to have that conversation if you're representing somebody that wants to build a house, that it's important that they make it contingent upon getting the house they want on the lot. Specifically, if it's in the country and it's going to require a septic system, the health department determines where that septic system is going to go. So just because they want to put their house in a certain spot on the lot doesn't mean they're actually going to be able to pull that off if there's a septic system involved. Same goes with if it's in the city, because you can't build a house over a gas line, the water line, MSD sewer line, etc. So there's a lot that goes into building a house, and it starts with picking the lot first. Understanding a floor plan is important so that when you are walking through the house, you can pick out what room is which, and understand that although there's dimensions on this particular plan, plans change. Even if I actually had a house that was under construction and they missed it by 2 feet in one of the rooms. So just because the plan says that the house is 2,100 feet, it still requires measuring it once it's completed, because it may be bigger or smaller. In my case, it was smaller. Also, most plans are built for framers, not for bricklayers. So the framing is going to be a different dimension because ANC requires all the measurement be on the outside, which means you're going to take into consideration that brick wall on the exterior as well. So it's going to add a little bit all the way around to your floor plan. Construction starts with a footer. They bring in the excavation machines to remove the dirt to build either a basement or a crawl space. All buildings sit on footers. This is a photograph of them pouring the exterior wall footers. The footers are typically designed by engineers to withstand a certain load, and you've heard people talk about load-bearing walls. The load-bearing walls sit on top of footers below grade. The exterior walls all sit on footers. They're going to pour the walls on top of these footers on all of the exterior walls of the property. So once they've dug the hole, they frame up these for the footers. You can see the rebar that they've placed in there, because the rebar is going to run up through the walls to help give that concrete some support. So you can see that these areas here are obviously going to be supporting walls in addition to this exterior footer here. This is how they construct houses today. They have preformed structures. They're going to put one on the exterior, one on the inside, and then pour the concrete in between. And there's rebar that goes from the top to the bottom through there. This is a gravel bed that they, a gravel bed that they have put underneath, or I'm sorry, on top of the dirt. Then they're going to pour the concrete on top of the gravel. This is going to help diffuse the water, the groundwater that will settle underneath the foundation. In the old days, they poured a single form foundation. And if you can tell in this photo on the left-hand side, you can see some remnants of where the wood forms were on the wall. So they dug a hole, they built a wood wall, poured the concrete between the dirt and that wall. Then they remove the wood once the concrete has settled and dried. And oftentimes they'll use the wood that they've used to pour the foundation to form the attic. So it could be the sheathing underneath the shingles in the attic. So when you go up into some of these older homes, and this house was built in the 50s, you will see remnants of what looks like concrete hanging off the boards up there, and that's what it's from. These boards were actually used to pour the foundation in the basement. So that would be a single form. The gray board is access to a crawl space. So anytime that you're in a basement and you see something like that, it's evident that it's probably a crawl space. Oftentimes they're screwed shut, so as a realtor, we're not going to be able to access them. But you want to make sure that the inspectors see all of this. Unfortunately, several times a year, I will get a phone call from somebody that says, wow, the inspector missed a crawl space and we've got serious issues. So it's important that we as realtors are looking around for these kinds of things. If the buyer starts to think, oh, this is the one, you need to become super sleuth and look around down here to see what you can find. And if you have looked at the house from the outside and there's some rooms that are offset and you go in the basement and the basement's perfectly square, that should be a clue that something's going on that room that's offset. So you want to look for a crawl space access on the outside of it, or maybe one in here like this gray door, which is actually the crawl space underneath a bedroom in this house. Back to the foundation. Once they have poured the concrete on top of the gravel, you will see there are expansion joints that are cut into the concrete. All concrete cracks, and that's a conversation you need to make sure you're having with your buyers and sellers. It is not unusual for concrete to crack in a foundation wall or floor. All concrete's going to crack at some point. You've seen concrete driveways that crack up. The expansion joints are hopeful that as the groundwater moves the foundation a bit, that it has room to expand and contract. That's why they're called expansion joints. The big yellow arrow at the top of the photo is showing the plumbing. Those are white PVC pipes that are coming through the ground. That's going to be future plumbing. You can see where the rebar's coming in on the blue arrow. Those are where they're going to actually secure the wooden sill plate to the foundation wall. They literally screw a nut on top of the wood to secure that sill plate, which is going to be a horizontal piece of wood that lays on top of this concrete wall, and then they build the stud walls off of that. I have actually had home inspectors say the house is not secured, which is crazy. I don't know how you would ever get an occupancy permit if they didn't do this. It was actually in a crawl space, and I had to hire a structural engineer to crawl through there. The home inspector couldn't see the screws because they were on the back side of all the stud walls, but they were truly there. The diagram on the left is explaining to you how the foundation is poured, and it talks about drain tile. Because the water sits below ground, the idea is to divert the water and control it, because the water, as we've talked about before, does more damage to a house than anything else. And so you try to control where that water is going to go. This is an example of a footer. That's going to be a wider load spreading support with your foundation wall sitting on top of it. There's your basement floor over here. And they have a drain tile on the outside so that it's getting the water away from the foundation and moving it somewhere to a lower level, hopefully, on the property. A lot of good builders, it's not always required, but good builders will usually put a drain tile on the inside of the foundation wall as well as the outside of the foundation wall. If you have ever seen somebody come in and waterproof a house, B-Dry will do it typically, they will cut a drain tile in the perimeter of the inside of the basement. And what happens is if the wall cracks, like in the photo to the right, the wall cracks and then they put a wall cavity, like a plastic sheathing on the inside of the wall. The problem is that it still allows the water to go through the foundation wall, down in behind that plastic cavity into the drain tile, and then it flows over to the sump pump and it pumps it out. The problem with it, in my opinion, is that water causes erosion. And if you continually allow water to go through that foundation wall, over time, it's going to erode it. My preferred way of waterproofing a house would be to seal the crack. And they have something that they use on runways. It's a flexible rubberized thing that they actually shoot into the crack, and it will expand and fill all the holes, which will alleviate the water from coming in through the foundation wall. That would be the preferable way to do it. Oftentimes, if you go into a house and you see that those plastic sheets are all the way around the foundation wall, that's a whole lot of cracks. I'm of the opinion I would not advise my buyer to buy a house that has been bead-dried to that extent. That would be a little scary for me. Too much water up against the foundation if they had to go to that extreme. So back to the foundation wall, once it's done, then they're going to backfill, preferably with gravel, up against the foundation wall, again, because it's going to let the water get away from the foundation. If this were all dirt, that water is going to stay up against that foundation because the dirt is going to be like a sponge, and it just sits there. And it can make for a very damp basement. So they typically will backfill it with gravel. You can see on the photo on the right, there's still a little space between the foundation wall and the dirt where they're going to backfill that, hopefully. One of my pet peeves is when people check in the MLS that it's a brick house. Brick houses mean they are solid brick. So the photo on the left shows what a brick house is really like. There are no studs in a brick house. This particular wall is a 4-course brick wall. Okay, these houses were typically built in Old Louisville, some of the original Highlands, maybe a few in Crescent Hill, but back in the 1900s, they were building houses out of solid brick, and they were not using wood studs to hold up the walls. The diagram on the right shows how the construction is done today with a 2x4 or 2x6 wall made out of wood, sometimes metal these days. But that is a brick veneer house on the right. The photo on the left would be a brick house because it's solid brick. Following me? Exterior walls are typically a stud made out of 2x6s or 2x4s, and then they either put vinyl, aluminum, wood, or brick on the exterior, so it's just a facade. That brick wall has no support value at all. It offers no more support than a vinyl or an aluminum sided house. Whereas a 4-course brick wall is going to be very comparable to a concrete foundation wall because it's 4-course brick thick, right? So once they have poured the foundation, then they start framing in the walls. And as you can see, this is an exterior wall over here on the right where the white arrow is. And this is a stair-step foundation pour. This would be in a walkout basement. The ground is going downhill, therefore they are pouring the foundation wall in the same level as the grade on the property. If this were a full basement, all 4 walls underground, you're going to have all the foundation walls up above the grade on all 4 sides. So this is evidence of a walkout basement. The red arrow points to the I-beam. This is a metal I-beam that they are sitting on top of footers. This is going to be a load-bearing wall. So I go back to, they put those square footers in the ground every so often. However, the engineer has designated the weight of the house and how many feet, how many inches deep, how many inches wide, and how far apart the footers need to be to hold up the weight of this I-beam, which is going to hold up the floor above it and possibly the floor above it as well. So in this particular house, there are 2 I-beams running parallel with one another, and then you have this post right here, which is designated every so often to sit on top of that footer. So there's going to be a footer directly underneath this post, a footer directly underneath this post, and then one back here, and then it's going to sit on the exterior wall up on the ground level. These are bolted. This often comes up in a home inspection report where they say that the post is not clipped or screwed into the I-beam, and that'll come up on your inspection report, and that's what that means. They claim that if somebody ran against that post and it wasn't secured to the I-beam, you could move the post. not likely. I mean, you'd have to have an elephant to do it, in my opinion, because you got the weight of the house sitting on that post. But nevertheless, it does come up. It is supposed to be bolted or clipped. There is a close-up of a clipped post right there. It is clamped onto the I-beam, and then you can see that they have screwed the plate, which is holding up the floor joists on the next level. They have screwed that plate to the I-beam no differently than they screw the sill plate to the foundation wall. Everything's secure. This is a close-up of how that I-beam is notched into the foundation. It doesn't look very pretty, but it is typically how it is done. And then they put what they call shims in here to keep this post from moving, or the beam from moving off of that foundation. So there's shims that they stuff up in there between the foundation and the I-beam. I have never seen them bolt underneath. They probably could, but I don't remember seeing that. They typically go into the side here. Just because it was bolted underneath and it could sway a little bit, so this gives it a little more secure. Same with the clip. This is a laminated beam, and a lot of the mass production builders will use a laminated beam. It's a lot lighter to maneuver. It doesn't require a crane to drop it in typically. It is basically pieces of wood that have been laminated together to be a certain width, whatever the engineer has designed, to carry the load of the floor above. So they don't always have I-beams in the houses. Sometimes you will see the main beam is made out of wood, and that's what this is. This is a laminated wood beam. Okay, again, you're not going to get an occupancy permit until the city inspector comes and gives his stamp of approval on the construction of this. Through every process, they're looking at the foundation, they're looking at the HVAC, they're looking at the plumbing, the electric, and the construction quality. So above doors and windows, they always have what's called a header. Sometimes these will sag, and if they are sagging, it is typically because this is the support over here on the side is not the correct structure to hold this up. When you see it, it is typically because somebody's made an addition. It is not usual to see it in a new construction situation, but if someone wants to take out a wall and add a door, or nowadays the big thing is to take out walls and open them up. And if you take out a wall that is underneath a supporting beam, you are going to have a sag unless it's been engineered by somebody that they've either put a header in to offset that load, or they've dropped a beam in the attic so that you can't see it, but something's got to be added to handle the load, and that's what this header is about. This is going to offset the load of all of these joists sitting over this opening, whereas you've got every 16 inches a stud holding up your weight over here. So when you've got a wide opening, they put a header in here, and then they shore it up on either side, no differently than a post underneath your main beam to offset that load. It's not typically like a 4x4. It's like a 2x8 or 2x10, depending on the width of the opening. Again, the engineer will design, architect, draftsman will dictate what that load is. And there's a mathematical equation to all of this. There's a close-up of the stair-step foundation, and these are the sill plates. What's called a sill plate is what is between the stud wall and the foundation wall. The sill plate is what you will see often in a termite report. If they reflect that the termites have eaten the sill plate, that's what they mean. This plate right here has to be chinked out and replaced in the event it's been chewed up by termites. And this is typically where they start, because the sill plate is usually really close to ground level. The problem lies with the fact that if you have a sill plate and somebody keeps adding mulch to the foundation and they get above the sill plate or above the brick line, it's just dirt up against that sill plate. It's an invitation for the termites to come right in. Okay, so technically you're supposed to keep your mulch and your dirt a couple of inches below where that sill plate's going to sit, so that you alleviate that problem. and the moisture doesn't get in there next to that sill plate. This is a 2x6 exterior wall. That's a good thing. 2x6 is obviously going to be a little bit more supportive than a 2x4. So they oftentimes will use a 2x6 on an exterior wall. This Lowe's here is a wrap. It is to help with insulation. It's to help water prevention. And then this piece of plastic here, the black, they're using this to help, again, keep that water off the sill. So they have put it underneath. You can barely see it over here. That black right there is to keep that water from getting in toward that sill plate. Same with termites. But oftentimes it gets ripped, so you just never know, but they're trying. So that's, if you see that, that's what that's for. And then you can see they have sealed this foundation with a tar-like substance to help with the waterproofing as well. Because again, all concrete cracks, and if you have this waterproofing substance on here, it should help with that water intrusion. Bracing between the floors, that's what these little pieces are right here. And as you walk on a floor, sometimes you can feel it move and shift. Oftentimes you can come back in and re-support it, or you'll notice that these have come loose and they're dangling. These are to keep those joists from moving. So they're keeping it sturdy. So if you go down into a basement of a house and you see them kind of hanging, most likely it moves a little bit up above it and just needs to be resecured. Again, the plumbing is coming up through the foundation floor. Those are white PVC pipes. You're going to have drains that go down into the foundation, typically your water line from your AC unit, the drain from the water heater. You oftentimes will see that little drain cover in the basement. That's what this is for. They make something called a silent truss floor joist, and that's a picture of what these are. This is a man-made fabricated thing where they've glued chips of wood together, but because it is wood and all of that glue together, it's much more, it's stronger than a normal floor joist and doesn't require the cross bracing. So if you see something like this, this is called a silent truss floor joist. You can see it when you're in your basement looking up. This is a truss framing system. A lot of mass production builders will use a truss framing system because they're made in a plant. Rather than put together on site with framers, they bring them in on a truck and they're already prefab. They're already the exact same size. They go up every 16 inches and it makes it a lot faster and supposedly a lot more square because they're already prefab. So you're not just cutting a board and missing it by an 1/8 of an inch here or 1/16 of an inch there, or somebody's having a bad day and they don't nail it all together properly. So this is an interesting way to do it. So if you see something like this in the attic or even the basement, you'll notice that it's a prefab truss system. So you walk into the house, your buyer's interested in a new construction neighborhood, and you see this on the floor. This is going to be the layout so that the kitchen cabinet people know where to put everything. The little 3 dots and the 1 dot over by the red arrow are where the sink's going to go. So just imagine that there's a sink with a drain right there. It's going to have a breakfast bar. That's what this over here is, a layout for the breakfast bar. This is a supporting wall. So this kitchen is going to be open into the great room or a dining area. So this is going to be the end of a structure that's load bearing. That's why these are all nailed together. So when you're walking in, you're going to look over here and you're going to see that you have hot and cold running water here and you've got a drain. So this is going to be a sink. This is actually going to be the kitchen sink in this particular photo. Over here, this contraption right here is where you're going to hook up your water line for your refrigerator. So you can say, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, the refrigerator is going to be over here in this corner. I can tell because it has this unit thing here. This is going to be in the master bathroom. I have hot and cold, and 2 drains. Therefore, the master's going to have a double bowl vanity. I can tell by looking at the plumbing. This is where your toilet's going to sit. You can see the water line coming in and the drain right here. So you can say I've got a double bowl vanity over here. This is where the toilet's going to sit, right? And then you can identify the shower or the bathtub, given the space, by the same sort of drain. So again, we're looking at headers. This is a header over the door. It'll be a 2x10 in this particular case. And you can tell here that they're going to use a tray ceiling. This is going to be in the master bedroom, and this is going to be a double frame ceiling, so it's going to be a tray. This is the same ceiling, tray. You can see how it's boxed out. And then I'm looking up into the tray, and it's going to have 4 can lights. That's what these are in the corners. The one in the middle is going to be for a ceiling fan or a middle light. And then this wired contraption over here is going to be your smoke detector. Okay, smoke detectors are required to be hardwired in new construction. So that's how you can identify what's going where. These can lights are braced in between the joists or the rafters here. So there is an example of Tavek, which is the wrap. It is basically to keep it more airtight, to keep water out. Heard about winds that blow the rain sideways and things, and sometimes in the old days it'll get up underneath the gutter board, or it can even come through windows. That's why caulking is so important, and this is supposed to help alleviate that issue. They didn't do this back in the 50s. They didn't have this kind of wrap back then. As I mentioned before, in the old days, they used to use the decking boards from the foundation, from pouring the foundation. Now they're using sheathing, which is typically 4x8 sheets of plywood. So you're going to have the plywood, the roofing material, then there's an underlayment again to help prevent the water intrusion, and then you're going to put the shingles on top of that. Where the shingles meet on an angle is called a valley. So this is going to be the valley right here. Sometimes it'll have a copper valley, just a chute, and sometimes it'll just overlap the shingles. So if you see something on your inspection report that's talking about the valley, that's what they mean. These are different kinds of roofs. This is a gable, and it's important that you understand a gable roof, because you're going to have somebody mention in a home inspection report a gable vent, and that would sit in here. If it had a gable vent, you know it's got a gable roof. This is a hip roof where you've got 4 different sides all coming together in one short chute over here. So all 4 sides are angled to the middle of the building. That's a hip roof. So down here, again, this is a gable roof, and this is your valley where it meets. And this is a mansard roof, which is typically a flat roof on the top, and then the roof comes down over the 2nd story of the house. Basically, it's taken from a French design. So this is a mansard roof. Yeah, it's kind of a mess. It's an architectural disaster, in my opinion. Yeah, it's still a gable roof. And then these are some of the definitions. And again, I'm recording this, so it's going to be placed on the YouTube channel. You can go back and review all of this, or just Google it yourself if you like. But these are going to be some of the definitions that are going to show up on your inspection report. Mostly you need to know rafters. That's what's going to support the decking. So that's important that you understand the roof is going to hold up, the rafters holding up the roof. The rake is the inclined edge of the sloped roof over the wall. That's between the edge, the eave, and the ridge. The ridge is the peak. The very top of the roof is going to be the ridge. So if you have a ridge vent, you know they're talking about the very top of the roof is going to let the air out so that it can breathe. Rolled roofing, you're going to hear that occasionally. And there is a mathematical equation to this as well. They talk about the pitch of the roof, and that is the steepness of it. If you have a low pitch roof, it's just a few inches. Every few feet, it just rises a few inches. Shingles are not allowed on low pitched roofs. That's where you're going to want either aluminum or copper or rolled roofing. And that's just, they roll it out. It's like shingle material, but it's rolled out in one big flat piece. And it's far better than a shingle on that low pitched roof. So you'll hear that periodically. The dormer, we talked about dormers, that comes off the, usually in a Cape Cod, you'll see a dormer come off, that you're going to hear about that. Talking about flashing. Soffits, and I'm going to show you pictures of all of this in a minute. The span is the horizontal distance from the eave to eave, and that is going to be how many squares of shingles you're going to need per span. We talked about valleys. This is your drip edge. You'll see this is missing sometimes on houses. I'm not sure why somebody would not put a drip edge, but it goes underneath the shingle. And again, it's to prohibit the water from getting underneath and rotting out that sheeting. This is a vent. As heat rises, you'll see these things spin in the summertime. So as they spin, they're pulling the heat out of the attic. This is a typical box vent. And again, the heat is rising, so it's escaping through that box vent. It is important that you have strong ventilation in your roofing system because it's going to prolong the age of your shingle. If it doesn't get to breathe, then your shingles start to curl and crack, and the lifespan of your shingle is it's going to deteriorate sooner rather than later. All right, so there's your gable roof and your hip roof all combined in one. I think it's a disaster, but nevertheless, it's very common these days. So you can see where all four sides are going to a short chute here. That's a hip roof. This long span is your ridge, and there's your gable. And this is just a nice diagram that's going to show you that you have to have airflow. So you've got a soffit vent here in the soffit. The air is going to go up between your interior ceiling and out through what is called a ridge vent here. So you've got good circulation. This is a valley that has either a copper or metal chute. So that's your valley here. This is a slate roof with a box gutter actually. This is flashing. You're going to hear about this a lot too on your home inspection reports. These rubber boots, which is what this is called, they tend to crack up over age. A lot of times they will suggest you put a lead boot. The lead it'll last a whole lot longer. However, squirrels love lead. So if you have any trees nearby your roof and you have lead boots, you're going to replace them every few years because the squirrels get up there and eat them for whatever reason. I don't know why. But if you have a flashing problem on a plumbing stack, that's what this is. All plumbing, the drains require ventilation. You have to have air in order for the drains to work. And so this typically will let you know that it's either a kitchen or a bathroom above this, because this is going to be the vent stack for your plumbing. This is a good close-up of your ridge vent. You can see that there are little screens in here that's going to allow the air to come out. It doesn't let the rain come in. Box gutters were common in older homes, and unfortunately, box gutters are typically built inside the wall of the property. So if the box gutters leak, then it starts to leak inside your building. This is a far preferable system over here to have the gutters on the exterior of the building. So in the event the gutters leak, hopefully the water leaks to the ground below and not inside the house. However, it's really interesting to note that if ice builds up in here, and this is why it's so important to keep your gutters clean. So if you see, and it's going to come up on your home inspection report all the time that the gutters are dirty, people think nothing of it. It's really important. You have leaves in here and you stop up that drain, that downspout, and then it freezes, the water will get up underneath the shingle and drip down into the foundation or into the wall. And I have seen a whole lot of houses in St. Matthews where all the plaster's cracked off on the inside of the building, and it's because their gutters are not kept clean, and the water gets up underneath the shingle and it basically rains inside. So it's between the brick and the drywall or the plaster, and it will collect water and start to make that plaster pop. All right. You will see a lot of houses that have no overhang, and these gutters sit right up against the brick. That's a recipe for disaster if you don't keep your gutters clean. Again, water is your biggest threat with a house. Diagram of roofing. Here's that flat roof. This is where they would put old roofing because of it not being the correct pitch. You've got a skylight, you've got a plumbing vent, you got a boxed vent over here. This is your gable vent, as I mentioned earlier. So if they talk about you need a screen on your gable vent to keep the squirrels out, that's what they mean right there. Chimney cracks. This comes up a lot as well. And this is something I think is really important to have a conversation with your seller before you list the property, because there's so many people out there that don't think about their chimneys. And when they have a home inspection, they don't realize how deteriorated it's been over years. And now a lot of people are telling you you have to completely rebuild your chimney. So this one is in pretty bad shape. It's pretty well cracked up. And what happens, it allows water to get inside the chimney structure itself, which causes spalling, which is what this picture shows, where the bricks have basically just cracked up like a pot would. If you left it outside in the winter and it froze, it just starts to crack up. It's no different than bricks doing that. So this is evidence of water getting in behind the brick, most likely through cracks in the chimney cap. So if they had to rebuild this chimney, some people are charging as much as $10,000 to do this. We actually had one where they didn't bother to fix the chimney cap. And a lot of these chimneys, this is a good example. This is a vent for a furnace. So if this cracks up and starts to cave in, and it happened on a house we had sold, it cracked up and fell in. Not only did they have to rebuild the entire chimney structure, it took out the furnace too, because when it went in, it blew up the furnace. So now you're not just $10,000 to do the chimney, you got another $5 or $6 grand to replace the furnace. So it can be very expensive. So this is something you need to discuss with your seller before you list the house if they've had anyone look at it. This is an example of a brick drop. If you're looking at a house and you see this little space here, you know that they're going to put brick on this foundation. If you don't see a brick drop, then it's going to be a vinyl sided or aluminum sided house, or maybe even frame. Okay, but if it's this wide, you know it's going to hold a brick. This is showing the flashing underneath where they've set this window, again, to try to eliminate any issues with water intrusion. So this is going to be, it works kind of like flashing, just to alleviate water from getting in there, and also air. This is just an example of an overhang, showing that you've got plenty of room so that your gutter board is out here. Your gutter is going to be far away from underneath here. Covered porch. Examples of, oh, I need to fix that, sorry. You've got plywood here, you've got manufactured here, and particle board here, and you're gonna see all three of these in different phases, different price ranges of homes. Plywood, it's basically sheets of wood veneer, okay? The problem with them is that, well, if they get wet, any of this, if it gets wet, will tend to warp. But plywood is more expensive, and it's going to be probably better, more solid than the others. This is a medium density fiberboard, MDF. It's very fine wood fibers. They're glued and compressed. It does not hold screws very well. It is cheaper. And then you've got particle board, which again is put together with adhesive. This is very typical of what that laminate beam was made out of. It expands too much due to moisture because the glue gets wet and starts to deteriorate. So this is not supposed to get wet. Unfortunately, this is what you will see more often than not when you're doing a fall home, because it's going to be a less expensive house and they're using less expensive materials. So those are the three different types of wood. They don't typically get wet. If the laminated beams, they don't usually get wet. It's when the water sits on the floor. If you walk through a Vol home, every now and then you'll feel a little soft spot, probably because it held water there for a while under construction. And they're all going to have water in them. Your guess is as good as mine. The idea would be to get under the roof as quickly as possible. Yeah, and if you have the option to build your house out of plywood, do so. And real wood. Right, right. MDF stands for medium density fiberboard, and it is made of a specific species of tree. It is chipped into pieces, so it is kind of dust-like when you, I mean, all wood is like dust. Yeah, it is when it starts to disintegrate. You're right. Dimensional shingles, brick veneer, stone veneer. This is all examples of this. You will see a flat tab roof does not have shingles sitting on top of one another. There's multi-levels, so you know that's a dimensional shake. A flat tab just has one run of shingle. And I think there's some photos in here about that. And then this is going to be your stone facade, which is going to usually be a fake stone manufactured, and then brick, and you would have seen the brick drop for both of these. Hardy Plank is a brand name for concrete board. It does not require paint as often as normal wood, and it is a much more solid and more expensive exterior. Stucco versus EIFS. Dravit and Stowe are brand names for EIFS, and the difference is that stucco is more like a concrete application, where EIFS is over basically styrofoam, and then it's just a covering. So it adds a little bit of insulation value, so they claim, but if you don't keep it sealed, it allows water to get in behind there, and your house can rot from the inside out. We actually pushed Zering out of Louisville because somebody poked a hole in one of their houses and it opened up like a dam, and the water was just spewing out. It was crazy. So it was rotting from the inside out. EIFS is Exterior Insulation and Finish System, EIFS. And they used to use it a lot in commercial. In fact, you will see it more in commercial than you see residential. Relocation companies will typically not take a house that has EIFS on it back into their inventory because of the issues associated with EIFS. If you are selling a house that has Dravit or Stowe or this fake stucco application on it, there is a specific warranty that you can get for that house. There's a company based out of Cincinnati that will send an inspector in and actually go through all of it from head to toe, top to bottom. What they're looking for is to make sure that water can't get in around any of the windows, the doors, where the corners meet. And they will give you a whole report on it and how to fix it. And then if you do all the repairs and they come back and give it 100% go, they'll warrant it for up to 5 years. But again, the water gets behind it and you don't know it, and it just causes mold and rot on the inside of the house. So you have to be very careful when you're selling an EIFS house to make sure that all of where the joints meet are tight. It has to be kept caulked. Yes. Where? Oh, I don't know. Yeah. If it was styrofoam, then it was definitely an EIFS wall. Yeah. Yeah. There are different variables of vinyl siding. You can buy vinyl that is insulated, and it's kind of a tough picture to see, but you can see there's insulation stuffed in between here, where on this one there is not. So this is obviously going to be more expensive, but don't judge a book by its cover. Just because it's a vinyl sided house doesn't necessarily mean it's an inferior product. So, because there are different kinds of vinyl. It is less expensive than aluminum siding. I have problems with both. We have hailstorms in Louisville, and hail can put holes into your vinyl, and it can dent your aluminum. So it's just a conversation to be had. Also, it's brittle. Vinyl can get very cold and rigid in the winter, and somebody throws a basketball up against the siding and it can crack. You will see weed eaters send rocks right through vinyl. There's holes in vinyl siding in just about every house I've ever shown. Problem with vinyl is people think, oh, well, I'll just replace a piece. It fades over time in the sun, so the likelihood of you getting a piece of vinyl to match is slim to none. So conversations to have with people. And I'll let you read through this later. I don't want to belabor. This is a long presentation. This is nail pops. This is a flat tab shingle. You can see they're not multi-level, and these are going to be nail props. It's a very simple fix. It comes up on almost any home inspection report. This is something you can see with your naked eye when you walk up to the front door. It's going to happen all the time. This is a boot that's all cracked up, and obviously it needs to be replaced, and some hairy homeowner got up there and thought they would just caulk it and try to seal it instead of replace the flashing. This is maybe a $200 repair. It's not a big deal, but it's a definite water intrusion issue. This is just downright bad. If you see this, you know that there's going to be issues underneath there because it's going to erode all the mortar in between the brick. That's a chimney. Yeah. This is a run, Forrest, run, do not buy this house. And if you're going to list this house, we need to have a conversation about it before you put it on the market or sell it as is and not make any repairs, because that's a problem. I like these over here. Most home inspectors are going to tell you that your downspouts need to be at least 4 feet away from the property. 4 to 6 is accurate. Again, because you don't want water near your foundation. And notice the grade is really important. And this comes up in a home inspection report as well. If the ground is sloping towards the foundation, this water is just a recipe for disaster. It's going to run right out of this downspout. And because it sits so high off the ground, in a heavy rain, it's going to dig a hole right here. And now you got water sitting right up against your foundation. It's obviously not a good thing. So again, anything you can do to get the water away from the foundation of the house, the better. This is a problem. You've got all of this up above the window here. Talk about an invitation for termites, water intrusion, bugs, bad deal. This is very common, a very simple fix. Again, I would probably extend this downspout either with that black round downspout extender or maybe another piece of downspout, but I would do that another 4 feet away and then use my splash block, kind of like this picture over here. This is the proper way to do a window well. It typically has a gravel bed down here, again, so that the water has a place to go. Back in the old days, when they did it right, they would put drains in here and actually get the water away from the foundation out into the yard. And this is to keep your water from getting into that window well, other than just normal rainwater. Then you've seen the covers, those plastic covers that they sell at Home Depot and Lowe's. That should be over this, and they make them to fit width. Water heaters. This one over here is an electric water heater. It has no vent. Okay, gas water heaters have vents. This is a tankless water heater. It can be either gas or electric. This is a gas water heater because it has a vent. This is a gas furnace. It's vented. And then this picture is a close-up of this right here, which all gas furnaces have. This is how you're going to light the pilot light. So the flame will stay lit to heat the water. This is the gas coming into the pilot light. So this is the ignition switch to light your pilot light, and this is your temperature control. This is a gas tankless water heater, and I know it because it has an intake to burn the gas and an out, or I'm sorry, this is your intake and this is your vent. So you know this is a gas one. This one's going to be an electric one. So these are just water hookups here and there. And this is a gas one. And there's the gas line right down there. Great. They're very efficient. They're expensive and worth every penny. They're approximately $1,500, which today a normal water heater is almost that expensive, but they don't take up any space, and they're very efficient. Right. And exactly. And this is a problem. I'm glad you brought it up because this is vented improperly and it doesn't look like there's going to be much more room to change the vent on this water heater. This would be the perfect opportunity to switch it out to a tankless water heater. Because if you don't get this carbon monoxide out of your house, it can kill you. And I actually showed a house a few years back and the owner had died. It was in an estate. And I walked over to look at the water heater, looked ancient, and I looked behind it, and this vent pipe was completely rusted through. So it was just letting all of the carbon monoxide out in the basement. And I'm thinking, I hope that wasn't what killed this poor person in this house, because it obviously had been like that for years. It was just gone, disintegrated because it rusted out. So now they use PVC, so it doesn't rust out. And this is your high efficiency furnace. You've got an intake and a vent on a high efficiency furnace. So when you see two PVC pipes, you know that it's high efficiency. The old days had gravity furnaces, which meant they had no moving parts. This was a photo of a gravity furnace. They used to call them an octopus. So you would throw the coal delivery guy would throw them in the coal bin into your basement. You would shovel the coal that they put in your coal bin into this contraption over here, keep the coal lit, and the heat would just rise and go through your house through all of these octopus arms. So this is the door where you would shove your coal and burn it that way. I saw this furnace a few years ago in a house in Crescent Hill. Somebody added a motor to push the heat through this octopus. Crazy. All right, electrical panels. Federal Pacific panels are a no-no. And if you walk into a house and you see Federal Pacific on the outside of the cover of your panel box, tell your buyer right up front, it's going to get dinged in your home inspection. They are dangerous. They have been known to cause fires. If you Google Federal panel boxes, which is what I tell my buyers, this is exactly what will pop up. This is a copy and paste from Google on Federal Pacific panels having defects. In older homes, it could be easier to replace a breaker in the panel box rather than installing a GFI. GFIs are ground fault interrupters. They will come up on your home inspection report because they are required now to be by water. So any kitchen, bathroom, exterior, basement by the laundry, GFIs are law. They're required. But because older homes were built differently back then, sometimes you can't get a GFI outlet into the wall. So to get around that, you can install a GFI circuit breaker into your panel box. So just because you don't see this by the kitchen or the bathroom doesn't mean it isn't GFI protected. Look at the breaker panel box. All right. To replace one of these is not hard. You take the cover off, you unscrew the outlet, you put the new outlet in there, put the panel cover on there, and you're done. You know, it's a $15 fix. Don't let it freak people out. It's not a big deal. The circuit breakers are a little more expensive and actually are required now in new construction homes that the panel boxes have GFI breakers installed here. All right. They trip often. All right. Examples of plumbing. This is a corroded copper pipe. This is a disconnected PVC pipe. And this is going to show you that this is a drain and this is the vent. Again, I mentioned to you that all plumbing requires a vent to properly drain. So when you see this going up through the roof, people are going to wonder why there's water going up to the roof. That's not it. It is a vent to make sure that the drain works properly. Sometimes when drains get clogged, it's because the vent got clogged. Sometimes in new construction, they forget to take the cap off of these when they install them on the roof, and they move in and the plumbing doesn't work. All you got to do is uncap the vent and everything should work fine. It's happened. PEX is something they're using now, and that would be this. These red and blue are going to be your water lines, incoming water lines, and they're using this now instead of this, mostly because of this problem here, but also it's flexible. It's much easier to maneuver a flexible PEX pipe than it is to solder copper pipes throughout a house, not to mention that this is very expensive. So PEX is color coded. Red is for hot, blue is for cold, white is for either. It can be done with a cinch or crimp rings. It's much easier than it is to sweat copper and to solder all that together. This is an example of a waistline. This is going to be your lead waistline, and they've attached PVC to it. So if you see this, you can see that they have changed all this out. That's an upgrade. That's a good thing to see in an older home where they've switched it out to this rather than the lead. This right here unscrews so that you can clean out your waistline. So if you need to run a snake in there, this is great to have either inside or outside so that you can easily clean your waistline. People ask me when we're looking at houses if they can add a bathroom. In this particular case, if I'm in this basement and they want to add a bathroom, I'm showing them that this is the waistline, which would require anything on the floor to be pumped up and out. So if you see anything that's in the basement, a bathroom that's been added, oftentimes they will have an up flush toilet, which means it's plugged into electric to a pump to pump that waste up and out the sewer line. If the power goes out, you're not going to pump that stuff up and out. So it's a conversation to be had. PVC resists corrosion, obviously. It's a lot less expensive, and it doesn't get damaged like copper. This is your silcock or hose bib. This will come up on your inspection report often as well. It's a very simple thing to fix. They do freeze. It's important that you remove your hose in the winter, because if this freezes, it backs up into there and causes the pipe to freeze behind the wall and can cause some serious damage. So you always want to make sure to tell your buyers to disconnect their hoses in the winter. Sump pumps usually last about 10 years. They roughly cost $190. In this particular case, if you walked into a house and you saw that there was a battery hooked up to the sump pump, then you know that this is a very necessary thing, because they're concerned if the power goes out that they're going to get water in their basement. So if you see that it is hooked up to a battery, you know that it's an important component of the house. I've gone in and seen sump pumps in sump crocks not plugged in. I look down in there, there's no water. They put a sump pump in there. They've never had any issues with it, which is why it's unplugged. Worthy of a conversation. It was built here for a reason. But again, you will see in older houses, a lot of the laundry rooms are hooked up to the sump crock. I actually lived in a house where the laundry drained into the sump pump, and then the sump pump pushed the water out through to the sewer. I actually replaced it when I moved in, and I wrote the date that I replaced it on the PVC pipe, because I didn't want to walk away from my laundry and have my sump pump fail. So I was going to replace that sump pump every 5 years, because it's only $190. And that way I wouldn't ever have to worry about water in my basement because a sump pump failed. And if a sump pump fails, it can cost thousands of dollars. And most people fail to get extra insurance to cover that. And that's a conversation to be had with your buyers as well. They want that water coverage. It's not that much more on their insurance policy. They need to have that. It's not water intrusion from a storm. It's going to be when your sump crock fails. Crawl spaces, this is a real issue here. They put wood against dirt, so it started to rot and deteriorate. Then they put a metal post in water, and it started to rust and deteriorate. So all of this is bad. This has a bit of a lean to it, which is kind of scary, but at least it's on concrete sitting on dirt. Ideally, whoever tried to fix this should have just simply either dug it out and poured a footer out of concrete, or bought a few stepping stones that you can get at Lowe's, set them on top of one another, and then set these on top of it so that they're up out of the water. That would have alleviated this problem, because now this is going to sag and droop. This is an example of a vapor barrier. This is going to keep your moisture, all the moisture that's in that dirt. As you can see, it's got a lot of moisture here and here. It's going to keep the moisture from getting in and rotting out your floor joists. It's going to help alleviate some mold issues. It's going to keep your house a lot drier. If you have a radon issue in that crawl space, they're going to take this and go all the way up the side of the wall, again, because concrete is porous. So they want to keep that plastic and seal it all the way through here to keep the radon from getting into the house. Joist hangers are going to come up in your inspection report often as well. These are examples of joist hangers. They are going to help offset the load and secure your deck from falling. They do fall. We have had people that have had too many people on their deck, and if they just have nailed this together, they're going to come loose and the deck's going to cave. So joist hangers are a very cheap fix. You can do it yourself. It's not hard, but look for them when you're showing a property. This is something called a cantilever, where they actually put the joist into the body of the house and sat it on the foundation wall. It got so wet that it rotted. Now to replace this, you're going to have to cut it out back into the body of the house. This is one where I said absolutely not, run, do not get involved in this, because we don't know how long it's done this. And just because we could think we're going to replace this one board doesn't mean that the rest of the wood behind that vinyl didn't soak up some of that water as well. I could have rotten studs all the way up into the body of the house. So this is a really bad deal. You got to be very mindful of if you see something cantilevered into the body of the house. Better to have it bolted to the exterior wall and then use your joist hangers. Insulation, these are different types of insulation. You've got blown in insulation, you've got batting. And if you have ever seen the Pink Panther on the insulation, it actually has the instructions printed on there. The paper is supposed to go up against the sheathing or the flooring, not the other way around. So this is the proper way to install it. The brown paper is on the floor, the pink is exposed, same within the walls. And this guy's blowing in that insulation that expands. Yeah. If you're going to write an offer, you want to use the Home Builder Association contract. More builders will use their own contract to protect their interest. They will typically not allow you to write an offer on our board contract to purchase new construction. Things to remember when you are talking to your buyer: if it is a house that has not been built yet, rock allowance can be a big deal. And you want to make sure that you have an idea of how much extra that could possibly cost your buyer in the event they start digging a basement and hit rock. It gets really expensive. What kind of driveway, whether it's going to be concrete or asphalt, that can be a huge difference as well. If it's a walkout basement, are there going to be retaining walls required? These are costs that buyers typically don't think about. It's no different than when a buyer walks in and they're looking at the light fixtures and the colors of the walls. They're not looking at the structure of the property. That's our job. So these things are important that you remind them. It's not just the fun stuff of picking out faucets and lighting and carpeting and doors. We got to think about the construction cost from the get-go. All builders have an allowance, and I have never seen a buyer stay within that allowance. They go haywire. They're going to give you a $1,500 lighting allowance, and your buyer's going to fall in love with an $800 chandelier. You're done. You don't have any bathroom light fixtures now because you spent it all on a chandelier. So you need to have that conversation up front as well. Deck versus patio. A lot of these mass construction builders are putting in an 8x8 patio off the back of the house. You can't get a dining table and chairs on an 8x8 patio. It's not enough room. Have the conversation with your buyer. The types of kitchen counters, there's all different grades of granite, etc. The landscaping, typically they will do very little on an allowance for landscaping. That's a conversation to have as well. Electrical outlet placement. I can't tell you how often I go into houses and the light switches are behind the doors. It's because nobody took the time to actually figure out how they're going to live in the house, that if I want to have this door swing this way, I probably want the light switch over on the right. If I want to have the door switch the other way because I've got a piece of furniture that's going to go on this wall, then I want the light switch placed on this side of the door. So walk through the house, have your buyer visualize where their furniture is going to be placed, and then place your outlets and your light switches accordingly. Different types of windows. This is going to be an awning window. These are casement windows. These are basically your typical window that's in most houses. This is going to be a bay window. This is a bow window. A bow window has a foundation underneath it. The bay is typically cantilevered out. This is a double hung. Sorry, I couldn't think of the word. This is a transom. These are called side lights. This is glass block that's been added to a basement window, which is a great insulation value to add this in a basement. This particular one they spent a little more money on and added where you can actually open it to get fresh air. Another pet peeve of mine, palladium with an M is a gas. It is used in a with catalytic converter. Palladian is named after the guy who designed the window. A Palladian window is a center arched window flanked by square windows. Okay, if you don't have these windows on the sides, it's not a Palladian window, it's an arched window. Palladian is center one is arched, flanked by square on either side with an N. You'll see it. You're going to laugh all the time now when you go in the MLS and somebody talks about a Palladium window. You know, haha, you're wrong.
He does it all the time.
These are different styles of houses in case you're looking for words to describe your house in the remarks section. You can flip through here and look at all the different types. Shutters, another pet peeve of mine is when they hang these backwards. Shutters were originally designed to cover the windows in case of storm. And so sometimes you'll see these are hung backwards.
Yeah,
More than half the time. So if you cover this, obviously it's going to cover the arch. If you hung it backwards, now it's going to go like this in the center. It's going to look really dumb. This is a great example. This shutter is the size of the window, which is typically what shutters were designed to do. Now they've designed all these little skinny vinyl windows that you can buy at Home Depot, and you're going to see a window that's 6 feet wide with a 12-inch wide shutter on it. It's kind of dumb looking. So these were actually designed to work like these. This is the example of a tray ceiling. This is actually a double tray because you've got 1, 2, 3 different ceiling heights. So that's a double tray ceiling. This is your vaulted, sometimes called a cathedral ceiling. This is going to be a barrel vault. You can see that it's a round ceiling, so that's a barrel vault. This is a coffered ceiling. This is that extra wood that's added in here. Some people call it a box beam ceiling. The true word is a coffered ceiling. Drywall finishes. This is your popcorn, usually sprayed on. This is a stippled ceiling so that they don't have to make it a nice smooth seam. They just go in there with a little sponge basically and stipple the ceiling. They don't have to worry about the seams. This is beadboard. Typically wood, but sometimes they have replicated it in vinyl. This is wainscoting. You will see this oftentimes in dining rooms, sometimes entry halls, sometimes up stairwells, but this is that half wall called wainscoting. These are different types of doors, and I'm not going to belabor this. You can go back here and look at it. But this is a 6-panel door, which is probably most common in Louisville. You can see it has 6 panels, hence the name. Oftentimes they will use this describing cabinet doors as well. Sliding doors versus French doors, they slide. These open and close. You'd be shocked how many times people call them sliders when they don't slide. They're actually French doors. They open. Solid surface counters, sometimes they can be made out of acrylic. They've done a really nice job replicating granite and marble out of acrylic. Marble is a very durable use. A lot of bakeries will use marble because it's so smooth and not porous so that they can roll their dough on marble. So that's a very good look, and for serious chefs, they will oftentimes prefer marble over granite. There's all different grades of granite. They can get extremely expensive. I've seen people spend $80,000 on granite counters in their kitchens. Not very smart because you never get your money back. But nevertheless, there's all different grades of granite. Butcher block, as long as it is sealed, that's a good option as well. I will tell you my least favorite countertop is a tiled countertop because it has mortar in it, and that mortar is porous. It is a recipe for bacteria. It is hard to keep it clean. So tiled counters are a hard sell, especially for someone who cooks a lot. They'll know that, all right? There's quartz, there's soapstone. Soapstone's actually what was used in labs back when you were in high school. Concrete, oftentimes poured on site, which is kind of cool. And then laminate is the most inexpensive of all, and they've done a nice job with laminates now. They make a lot of laminate look like granite. It's most economical. So if you're going to represent somebody that's going to do an investment property, I'm all about laminate. It's easy to switch it out. If somebody's trashing your granite, that's a really big expense. So I'm all about laminate. I'm not all about laminate floors. They are not all created equal, which I thought was really fun when I went to Google all of this. There are different types of engineered flooring. Pergo was probably the original of the laminates. They have had a lot of knockoffs. People tend to use mops when they clean them because they think they're plastic. Why not? And if you haven't noticed, some of the inexpensive ones curdle. They fall apart. They disintegrate. I am not a fan of laminated floors unless they're serious. This one is a pretty nice one. It's very thick. This is an engineered hardwood floor, some of which can be sanded up to 3 times, depending on the quality. And then you've got a real hardwood floor, which can be sanded multiple times. Keep in mind, pine is not a hard wood. Pine is a very soft wood. So if you aren't sure whether your house has hardwood or pine, hardwood would be oak, just call them wood floors, because you don't want to get caught up misrepresenting what kind of flooring you have. Pergo invented laminated floors, and this is a nice example of it. A lot of the ones that actually are tongue and groove, they hold together a lot better than the ones that are just peel back the adhesive and lay it down. They fall apart. I'm not going to go through this. Obviously, there's multiple different kinds of choices on appliances. It's going to give you all kinds of information about dishwashers. I will tell you that a lot of times in a home inspection, they will say there's no air gap. Oftentimes the air gaps can be now placed underneath the sink, so you won't see it on top. That's that little silver cone that you used to see in the old days on top of the counters. Dishwashers today actually are built with grinders in them, so they don't require air gaps. So if it's a relatively new dishwasher in the last few years, they're not going to have an air gap, period. But a home inspector is still going to mention it on the report. Send them to Google, have them look it up, because I am not going to allow my seller to drill a hole through their granite to add an air gap for a 6-month-old dishwasher. Not going to happen. Talking about stainless steel versus the black, which Samsung created, and I will tell you that my appliance repair guy says Samsung makes great televisions, period. Okay? I had 2 Samsung refrigerators in a house that I lived in for 4 years. 2 in 4 years, just to give you an idea. Samsung makes great televisions. Average age of the components: stoves live at about 15 years, dryers and refrigerators about 13, dishwashers and microwaves 9. GFI outlets, they can be faulty the day they get put in. I just had it happen on a house on Height. It was a bad, faulty GFI. You've got to test them. They only last about 10 years. They're going to die. Same with hardwired smoke detectors. They die too. So just because you are having a hardwired house doesn't mean that they don't need to be switched out. If you go in and you see the battery has been removed from them, it's a sure sign that the smoke detector itself probably needs to be replaced. Hardwired smoke detector. Furnaces can last over 20 years depending on the brand. There are a few furnace companies that actually went out of business because they always built them and they never died. Williamson was one of them. Those furnaces lasted 50, 60 years. Fireplaces are an issue. I can't tell you how often I go into a house and somebody has tried to light a wood fire in a fireplace that is not conducive for real fires. So you have to be very careful what you have. Don't ever tell someone just because there's a fireplace in the house, you can burn wood in it. That is not the truth. So you can read through this and figure out the difference. That is a real fireplace down here. And I would only recommend somebody burn wood in a fireplace that has real masonry fire rated brick in it. And you'll see it. You'll know that it's the real thing. It's not just a piece of fake stone. It's real masonry brick. Galley style kitchen is one that is typically not an eat-in. It doesn't have a dining area in it. So this is a galley where it's just one long hall, basically, with your appliances on either side. That would be a galley kitchen. Jack and Jill bathroom means that you have 2 doors to the bath. It can be to a bedroom and a hall. It can be bedroom to bedroom. It can be bedroom, bedroom, and hall. That would make it a Jack and Jill. Definition of a master bathroom. This comes up, and in fact, it was on the GLAR Facebook page. A bathroom that is directly connected to and entered through the master bedroom is the only way you can call it a master bath. It is not a hall bath. If it's attached to the master, it would be a master bath. A hall bath cannot be a master bath. And the largest bedroom in the house is what we call a master bedroom. It doesn't have to have a bathroom attached. The master bedroom is what's the largest. GLAR is going to change that to primary bedroom, not master. Great room definition, often misused in the MLS, means that it can be used for 2 purposes. It can be a sitting area and a dining area in one room. If it's large enough to accommodate a sitting area and a dining table, it is a great room. Okay? They call living rooms great rooms all the time, but there's not enough room to put a sofa, a chair, and a dining room table in it. It is not a great room. Decks, lots of information here about the difference in cost between patios and decks and the different kinds of products you can use for your deck. That's all I got. Wow, it did go an hour and a half. Any questions? It's a lot of information.
Thank you, Allison. That was a lot. Oh my gosh.
Thank you for sitting through it. I appreciate that. It
Oh my
has been
gosh.
recorded, so it'll be on YouTube, and I'll let everybody know.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. Appreciate you sitting through it.